just the Serapeum is a hollowed out massive series of tunnels. It's hollowed out of the bedrock. I think it's up near Dashur, and they're inside in these alcoves off to the sides of these tunnels, and also in there's actually one. There's actually one in a hallway as well of these massive granite boxes, and there's some where they weigh between 70 and with the lids up to 100 tons, so 30-ton lids, and just incredible precision engineering and manufacture of these boxes. There's been lots and lots of analysis done on them and written about them, yet there is that none of those factors and looking at the precision of these boxes, and we could talk for hours just about the Serapeum, but none of that is used in how they're dated. And the way they're dated is that if you go to one of the boxes in the very end, it's one of a couple that have some writing on it, some hieroglyphs sort of chiseled into it, if you could even call it that. And you go down and look at this, and there's it's chicken, as you say, chicken scratch, whereas you can tell it's been hammered very poorly into the side of this perfectly flat, straight surfaces.
None of the lines
Chips
are straight.
Missing. Yeah, none of the lines are straight.
They can't make. They're using. To me, it's obvious they're using the best tools they have to try to make, a clear indentation in the stone, and you can't even see it. I mean, you can see it, but it doesn't go down more than like maybe a millimeter, half millimeter in the stone. All of the lines are jagged and scratchy. They're not straight. I mean, it honestly looks like something like they let a child practice on. Is kind of like the effect it has. But there's no way, if you have the ability to carve out the interior of those stones with the lovely right angles, or those boxes, and make a lid for it and polish it to that sort of buttery smoothness that reflects light almost like a mirror, like a black mirror. If you can do that, then you can carve hieroglyphs in the side. There's
easily,
just no
right.
Yeah, and you don't have any problem doing that.
And that's the issue with that is that this is considered the box with the writing on it that you can go down and look at, and you can look at this chicken scratch, and it's obvious to anyone, as you say, that this is not, whoever did the writing on this box was not remotely using the same technology that was used to create the box, or the tunnels the box are in, for that matter. Moving the box is a whole other thing. But what the Egyptologists do is, because that box has been written on, and because there's some shems and some names on there, not to mention there's an empty shem on there too, but because there's a name on there that associates it with a specific dynasty, I think it's a Middle Kingdom association there's the name of Middle Kingdom pharaoh. They date not only the writing, they date the box, and they date the cavern system as well to that pharaoh. So there you go.
And you know what? I would say if they actually turned around and said, we don't really know, but there's some writing on there from the Middle Kingdom, so we know it's at least that old, I would go, you know what? That's reasonable. That's a reasonable thing to say. Well, you can say we don't really know how old it is, but there's something in there that's Middle Kingdom, so it's at least that old.
Yeah.
Then you could go, wow, that's kind of interesting. Why don't we just keep an open mind and keep thinking about that? But before we go on, I want to go back to the writing on those boxes, because there's other problems with the writing on those boxes. I think there's 3 of them in there that have hieroglyphs on them, and there's the one at the end that's absolutely covered. Yeah. And then there's 2 others in there that have like a sentence, pretty much. So there is a shen ring in one of these sentences that's written on the box, and there's a problem with it, because in ancient Egypt, when you were writing, if you were mentioned a neter, which we think of as their gods, but I think they thought of more as like a force of nature. But if you mention, like, for example, if I wrote the sentence, today,
where the word comes from,
Osiris and I went to the beach, you would actually write, Osiris, today and I went to the beach. You do that out of respect for the neter. So instead of today Osiris and I went to the beach, it would say Osiris, today and I went to the beach. That's how they would write it. There's endless examples of Egyptians putting the neter at the beginning out of respect. And that box is not like that. It literally says, like, today Osiris and I went to the beach. It's been written in the correct form to our minds if we were reading it. But that's not how the ancient Egyptians would have written that. So at what point, who carved that shit?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the problem is if they admit this, it's kind of opening Pandora's box with everything. Because once you go to the Serapeum and get your eyes open, that clearly he who hammered chisel and whatever it was he was trying to use that barely scratches this thing wasn't using the same technology. Then you go and you go into the museum, and the whole first floor there on the bottom, you walk straight in, go straight forward, and you just are surrounded by sarcophaguses and boxes and ben stones and statues, and you look at these things, and it becomes apparent that almost all of these things are exactly the same as that box in the Serapeum. You can clearly identify.
See it time.
You can
time
clearly identify what the precision and the polished surface and the finish of these objects. They were just beautiful, absolutely beautifully precise, and all of these, and Chris Dunn looks at he discusses precision, but then you look at the writing that's on all of these boxes, and it all displays the same. You're definitely carved, and some of it's fine, some of it's fine work. I mean, this is why it's in the Egyptian Museum. Some of that stuff is really fine, but clearly not the same as the techniques or technology used to create these things, and it's almost on everything in that museum.
You see almost every single example of those boxes in there, that the box has been created and finished and polished to a high degree before the writing goes on the box. If you're doing it all at the same time, you're gonna make the box, you're gonna carve into it, and then you're gonna polish it and finish it, and then it's all done and it's beautiful. And instead, that's not what we see. And it's obvious as you go through. I mean, Ramses II is possibly the greatest example of it, and his son Merenptah. But there's a ton. They were all at it. They were all at it. They all went and claimed earlier monuments, and there's
so maybe that's
absolutely no doubt that there were a large amount of stuff that had absolutely no writing on it that you still see lying around, but that was then claimed and had writing, all over it, and then people turn around and say, "Oh, this was created, in the time of Ramses the Great." Yeah. All of a sudden, he's Ramses the Great because he wrote his fucking name on everything.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So this is the argument, right? So remember back I said that this is how Egyptologists date everything, is by the writing. They don't consider the manufacture of these things. So trying to admit that would be like admitting that there's a damn good possibility that the ancient Egyptians found these sites just as sacred as we do. They found the objects just as mysterious, and probably they may have been connected to whatever culture originally built them, yet lacked the capability to replicate it. Maybe who knows, but it's quite likely that they then claim these spaces and use them. Certainly that's what we do today. Right. I mean, we still find these spaces just incredibly sacred and special.